When I was in university, I took a course for my English major where it was related to race theories and decolonization. One thing that stood out to me was how the teacher, who I won't reveal her identity for privacy reasons, claimed that apparently the origins of the police in North America weren't meant to be enforcers of the law, but rather they were meant to keep minorities and especially slaves in line, as shown by the Napoleonic Wars and even the early Americans, where the slave guards used their authority to keep the indigenous as well as those of African descent in line. While I agree that there have been some very corrupt and incompetent members of law enforcement or even the military, demonizing and defunding them isn't exactly the best way to deal with the issues of social corruption. Even my old neighbor, who I will not say his full name for privacy reasons either, pointed out how doing something like that isn't necessarily a great idea in the long run, since it'll lead to more anarchy and crime rates skyrocketing, along with warping people's perception of right and wrong. Considering how I myself was part of the military, or at least in the Navy, even if it was for a reservist position, I too feel as if demonizing the police and law enforcement is rather extreme in itself, especially since there have been cases of good police officers or soldiers who fought for their countries and people. Even in the world wars and wars outside of them, soldiers don't get as much respect because society is so used to treating them as hardened killers who have no place in their own homes, not realizing or caring about the scars they hold, and I don't mean the physical kind. Also, an interesting thing to note is that when I was in my decolonization class, I learned about the Oka crisis, where it involved a standoff between the Mohawk people and sympathizers against the law enforcement and military soldiers over the development of a golf course on the land that belonged to Mohawk people in Quebec. From the perspective of my decolonization class, the teacher in the documentary claimed that the military was at fault for building land off of sacred ground that was essential to the indigenous people, whereas the military instructors at the basic training camp I went to for my Navy unit believed the indigenous people and protesters were being unreasonable and too confrontational to the point where they were making things worse than better. While I personally try to be objective about this kind of stuff, it does garner the question as to whether the police or military have any say in the matter regarding these kinds of incidents in both real life and fiction. While I understand that the law isn't perfect, at least by human standards, the people enforcing it shouldn't necessarily lose their jobs over it, nor be treated like monsters, especially if they get blamed for doing stuff that the government is making them do. What happened to the likes of Captain George Stacey or even Commissioner Jim Gordon, who used their authority in the law to protect the civilians' rights and even assist the superpowered heroes or vigilantes of their time? If I were to write stories involving the law and the military, I'd rather portray them as being more competent and actually doing their jobs instead of the usual dirty cop or police are useless trope, or worse, the rabid cop trope that often gets used as a way to make law enforcement incompetent or stupid. While I do plan on featuring those kinds of cops in my stories, it is to serve as an example what not to do, especially since realism will be used instead of being treated as a silly gag like the Naked Gun / Police Squad series, though I admit it is pretty funny. Also, any police officer or armed force superior who tries to pull rank and act like an obstructive bureaucrat for the heroes or protagonists of my stories will face punishment, especially if their actions made things worse and they refuse to take responsibility to the point of breaking the very laws they preach. You can say my depiction of law enforcement officers and members will be more nuanced and realistic, as I feel that this kind of depiction gets disused or reduced to flanderization for the sake of comedy, drama, or shock value. Considering how influential mass media and entertainment tends to be to the point of coloring people's judgment for better or for worse, I feel like portraying the cops and soldiers of our country, or any country for that matter, is going to negatively affect their reputations in the long run and make things more difficult for future generations to trust them.